Every single day at exactly 3 in the afternoon, a young woman named Sarah Wells would walk to the street corner. She'd put down her little basket of roses on the sidewalk, and in the softest voice she'd say, "Fresh roses, ma'am, $3 a stem." Nobody stopped. Nobody even looked. Sarah was 27 years old. Her hair was always tied back in a hurry. Her hands were rough from all those thorns. Her shirt had been washed so many times it wasn't really a color anymore. It had just faded to the fancy guests walking out through the big gold spinning doors of the Harlow Grand Hotel. Sarah was just a shape on the edge of the street, nothing more, nothing less. Right next to her stood her little girl, Lily, 5 years old, messy blonde hair, big blue eyes that were way too bright for a sad kind of day like this. Lily would crouch down on the ground and press the fallen rose petals flat against her old little dress. Then she'd look up and wave at strangers with this huge happy smile that nobody ever gave back to her. But here's the thing, here's what nobody on that street knew about the flower. Selling mom, Sarah Wells spoke Italian. Not just a little bit, like she sounded like she was born in Italy. Her mother, Gloria, a woman whose hands always smelled like fresh basil, had taught her that language since before Sarah could even read a single word of English. Italian lullabies at bedtime, fairy tales told beside the stove. Long afternoons cooking together where Gloria would only speak Italian on purpose, so Sarah would soak up every sound, every single word. But Gloria was gone now. Cancer took her in the very same month Sarah gave birth to Lily, the very month she lost everything else too. Now it was just Sarah and Lily scraping by day to day. The rose money was enough for a plate of pasta that night, but not enough for the rent this month, and definitely not enough for the lawyer she needed for the custody hearing next week. Now, being invisible, it has its advantages. When people don't see you, they don't watch what they say around you. When they treat you like you're part of the sidewalk, they'll say anything right in front of you, without a single second thought. And at 5:47 in the evening on that Tuesday, Sarah heard a sentence in Italian that made her blood go cold. She looked over. 3 hotel security guards were standing near the entrance, smoking, laughing. The one in the middle, Marcus Cole, head of hotel security, had just finished saying something in Italian. And he finished it with this motion, both hands flying open like an explosion. The other 2 laughed even harder. Sarah glanced at the sleek black car parked along the curb, the car that every single day at exactly 6 o'clock the hotel owner stepped into. She looked back at the 3 guards, speaking a language they were sure nobody around them understood. And Sarah understood every single word. Someone was about to die. She looked down at Lily, who was looking up at her asking, "Mom, what's wrong?" Then Sarah looked at the big clock above the hotel's spinning doors. 5:47, 13 minutes. She had 13 minutes to save a man who had never once looked at her. And she was nobody, just a single mom selling flowers on a corner that the whole world walked past. 5:48, Sarah picked Lily up onto her hip. The flower basket swayed on her other arm. She hurried toward the black car. Her heart was pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears, like a countdown. The hotel owner's driver was standing by the car. A man around 50, salt-tanned, pepper hair, super straight posture, neat black suit. His name was Thomas. Sarah knew that because she'd heard hotel staff call him by name hundreds of times over the 4 months she'd been selling flowers on this corner. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said, more out of breath than she meant to be. "I need to tell you something important about this car." Thomas looked up. His eyes moved from her flushed face to the flower basket to Lily on her hip, and then back to her eyes. Sarah had seen that look 1,000 times, the look that says, "Not relevant. What do you need?" he asked. Not cold, not warm either. The voice of someone who knows they'll forget this person in 30 seconds. "This car," Sarah said, swallowing hard. "The guards, the hotel security, they were just talking about this car. They're planning something dangerous." Thomas frowned. But not the kind of frown that means he's listening, the kind where he's already looking for a polite way out. "You sell flowers, right? I see you on the corner every day." "Yes, but this isn't about flowers. Please listen to me. They said something about a device, about when the owner opens the car door." "Ma'am," Thomas raised one hand, gentle but final. "I'm working, Mr. Dalton will be coming down in a few minutes, and I need to get the car ready. If you have a concern, you can speak with the front desk inside. But this is about his safety." Thomas had already turned away, eyes fixed on his phone. Done. Lily, still sitting on her mom's hip, held out a tiny rose toward Thomas and waved at him. "Hi, mister," she said, clear as a little bell. Thomas turned back, and for the first time his face softened. He smiled at Lily. "Hello, sweetheart." Then he turned back to his phone. He could smile at the little girl and still not hear the mother shaking. Right beside her, Sarah stepped back 2 steps, heart sinking. First try, failed. She looked up at the Harlow Grand's glass tower. Somewhere up on the top floor, Nathan Dalton was getting ready to leave his office. Sarah knew who he was. Of course she did. Everyone on this street knew. Head of the Harlow Empire, 36 years old, built from nothing, a face cold like stone, a walk like the whole city belonged to him. Sarah had seen him exactly twice in the 4 months she'd been selling flowers here. The first time, he walked straight past her like she wasn't there. The second time, Lily waved at him. He didn't even look down. It wasn't hate. It wasn't even rudeness. He just truly didn't see them. To Nathan Dalton, Sarah and Lily didn't exist. And now that exact man, so precise, so powerful, so cold, was coming down from the highest floor, completely unaware that the car he was about to step in to had already been set up to kill him, and the only person who knew it had just been brushed off by his driver. Sarah looked at the hotel clock. 5:49. 11 minutes left. If no one out here was going to listen, she had to go inside. She tightened her grip on Lily, took a deep breath, and walked straight through those big gold spinning doors. Like she belonged there. The lobby opened up in front of her like another world. The floor was so shiny she could see herself in it. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling so high it felt like the sky. Fresh flowers everywhere. Cold, perfectly clean air. Everything in here spoke the same language. You don't belong. The flower basket in her hand, her heels worn down, her faded shirt. Lily with her messy blonde hair and her old dress. Mother and daughter stood out in that 5-star lobby like 2 ink stains on white paper. She hadn't made it 5 steps before a lobby guard stepped in front of her. Big guy, black uniform, eyes that summed her up in less than a second. "This area isn't for vending, ma'am. You need to leave." "I'm not selling flowers," Sarah said quickly. "I need to see Mr. Dalton right now. Someone's trying to hurt him." The guard's face didn't change, not one muscle. "Mr. Dalton doesn't meet with anyone without an appointment. Please leave the lobby. You don't understand." Sarah stepped forward, her voice starting to shake. "This is life and death. I heard his guards planning to hurt him right outside just now. They talked about the car, about a device. Please just report it to someone." "Anyone, ma'am." The guard's hand came down on her shoulder, not rough but firm, the firm kind that has pushed hundreds of people out of lobbies and knows exactly how much force to use. "I'm not going to say it again. Leave now." Sarah felt that hand turn her around. Her feet moved backward before she could stop them. "Please," I heard them speaking Italian. A device under the car seat, remote detonation at 6 when he gets in. The revolving door pushed her outside. Street noise hit her like a wall, and Lily was crying. Not the little fussy kind of crying. This was scared crying. Her whole tiny body was shaking. Both arms locked tight around her mom's neck. She had seen everything. Seen a man 3 times her mom's size put his hand on her mom's shoulder. Seen her mom pushed. Seen her mom beg and nobody listen. Mom, Lily sobbed, her voice thick with tears. Mom, he pushed you. Sarah dropped to her knees right there on the sidewalk. She set Lily down in front of her and wrapped both arms around her small, shaking body. The basket tipped over beside them. A few roses rolled toward the curb. Sarah didn't look. She only looked at Lily. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. I'm fine. Her eyes burned so bad she had to tilt her face up to the sky for a second. Don't cry, not in front of Lily. She breathed in, swallowed the lump. Then she looked back at her daughter and forced a smile with shaking lips. I'm okay. See, I'm still here with you. Lily was still hiccuping, but she nodded. Her tiny hand gripped her mom's finger like letting go might make her disappear. Sarah pulled her close, her chin resting on top of Lily's head, and looked at the gold spinning doors that had just shut in their faces. Twice the clock above the hotel said 5:51, 9 minutes left, 5:52, 8 minutes left. Sarah sat on the sidewalk with her back against the big planter near the hotel entrance. Lily curled in her lap like a scared little kitten. The crying had stopped, but Lily's shoulders still trembled in waves. Her tiny hand gripping the collar of Sarah's shirt, her face pressed into her mom's chest. Around them, the city kept going. People rushing past, cars honking. Nobody stopped, and inside Sarah, a voice started whispering, "Go home. Pick up your daughter and go home. You tried twice. No one listened. You're just a single mom selling flowers. This isn't your responsibility." That voice was gentle, the way fear is always gentle when it wants you to quit. It told her she had every right to stand up, gather her roses, take Lily home, cook pasta, put her daughter to bed, and pretend this afternoon had never happened. Nobody knew what she'd heard. Nobody would blame her. If something terrible happened, it wouldn't be her fault. She was just the flower seller. She owed nobody anything. And her daughter was scared. Sarah looked down at Lily. Strands of the little girl's tangled blonde hair had crushed rose petals stuck in them from playing on the ground. Her lashes were still wet, her lips pressed tight. That way kids press their lips when they're trying so hard to be brave. Even while they're breaking inside, 5 years old. Her little girl was only 5, and she had already watched her mom get shoved out a door. Take her home, keep her safe, keep her warm. But then, underneath that whisper of fear, another voice rose. Not Sarah's voice, Gloria's, her mother's voice in Italian, warm and clear, like she was sitting right there beside her. Like she had never left. Silence in the face of wrong is being part of that wrong. Sarah had been 14 years old the winter afternoon Gloria said that. They had watched a man shouting at his wife in a grocery store. Nobody around them spoke up. Gloria had spoken up. A small woman with a thick Italian accent, standing in front of a man twice her size and saying, "You do not treat anyone that way." Sarah had begged her mom to leave. She remembered how scared she was. She remembered Gloria looking at her and saying those words. Sarah looked down at Lily again. And this time she didn't just see a scared little kid. She saw a child watching her mom, watching to learn. Learning how her mom acts when the world knocks her down, learning whether her mom gets back up or walks away. Gloria hadn't raised her to walk away, and she wasn't going to raise Lily that way either. Sarah took a long breath. Then another. Her hands were still shaking, her legs still weak, but she set Lily on her feet in front of her, held her gently by the shoulders, and looked straight into her daughter's blue eyes. Willa, listen to me. Her voice was soft now, but it didn't shake. I'm about to do something really important. Some grown-ups might raise their voices. It might feel a little scary. But I need you to be brave with me. Can you do that? Lily looked at her mom, 5 years old. She didn't understand what a bomb was. She didn't understand words like conspiracy or betrayal. But she understood that her mom was looking at her with the most serious eyes she had ever seen. And she understood that her mom was asking for her help. I'm brave, Lily said. Her voice was tiny, but it was steady. Sarah pulled her into a tight hug. Then she stood up, picked up the flower basket, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and fixed her eyes on the spinning doors, where in 7 minutes Nathan Dalton would walk out. 5:56, 4 minutes left. Sarah led Lily to the far edge of the stone pillar, well away from the curb and the black car. She crouched down, hands on her daughter's shoulders. Lily, stay behind this thick stone wall. Do not move until I come get you. Lily nodded, clutching the last rose from the basket to her chest like a teddy bear, eyes still red, but not crying any more. Sarah stood. She stepped forward to the space directly in front of the spinning doors, exactly where anyone coming out of that hotel would have to pass her. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her temples, in the tips of her fingers. She saw Thomas standing beside the black car, hand on the door handle, ready to open it. She saw the car. She knew what was hiding under the seat. She saw Marcus Cole, the head security guard, across the street, leaning against a lamp post, eyes fixed on the hotel entrance, waiting. 2 of his guys stood nearby, all 3 calm, like wolves waiting for the moment. Then the spinning door began to turn. Nathan Dalton stepped out of the Harlow Grand at exactly 5:56. Right on schedule, like he always was. Perfect charcoal gray suit, polished black shoes, phone pressed to his ear. Low, cool voice talking about numbers. He didn't look at the sky, didn't look at the street, didn't look at anyone. He walked like a machine with one set path, door to car, 13 steps, no more, no less. Thomas saw his boss coming and immediately pulled the car door open wide. Mr. Dalton, Sarah called out. Her voice came out louder than she wanted, shakier than she wanted, more desperate than she wanted. Nathan didn't turn his head, didn't slow down. The phone stayed at his ear. 13 steps became 10. Mr. Dalton, please don't get into that car. 9 steps. 8, 7, he kept walking, still talking into the phone, eyes straight ahead. Sarah didn't exist. Her voice didn't exist. Her warning didn't exist. 6 steps, 5. Thomas stood by the open door. 4 more steps and Nathan would bend into that car. With a bomb underneath the seat, Sarah ran. She stopped thinking, stopped measuring her words, stopped calculating how to sound believable. She just ran straight at him, and when she was 2 steps away, she reached out and grabbed the sleeve of Nathan Dalton's suit jacket. He stopped, not because he'd heard her, but because something was holding his arm. Nathan looked down. A hand with rough skin, short nails, a thin scratch from a rose thorn across one finger, gripping the fabric of his jacket. Then he looked up into the face of the breathless woman standing in front of him. His eyes were cold, like frost on glass in the morning. Let go. 2 words, not loud. They didn't need to be. Nathan Dalton's voice was the kind that got more dangerous the quieter it got. And right now it was almost a whisper. There's a bomb in the car, Sarah said, and she heard her own voice crack on the last word. They planted a device under the seat. When you open the door and get in, they'll set it off. Nathan looked at her for 1 second. Then he glanced at Thomas. Then he started to turn away like the conversation was over. He didn't believe her. Of course he didn't. A flower. Selling Mom had just grabbed his sleeve and started talking about bombs. Security, Nathan said calmly, and a guard stepped forward. Sarah saw his face, and the blood in her body went cold. For the second time that afternoon, it was one of the three men, one of the men who had stood outside laughing when Marcus made that exploding gesture, one of the men who had casually said in Italian a remote detonation like he was ordering lunch. He was walking toward her now. Face blank, hand already reaching out to grab her. If he touched her, she'd be dragged away again, and this time there would be no other chance. 3 steps and Nathan would be inside that car. The guard was 2 meters away, and Sarah did the only thing she had left. She opened her mouth and spoke in Italian, her mother's language, every word sharp, clear, perfect. Like a blade cutting through the afternoon air, Gloria's voice, Gloria's language, the last thing her mother had ever given her. Nathan Dalton froze mid-step. He didn't speak Italian, but he heard something that couldn't be faked. Nobody could fake that kind of precision, not a woman selling flowers on a sidewalk. He turned back slowly. And for the first time in 4 months, for the very first time since Sarah had started selling roses on that corner, Nathan Dalton looked at her, truly looked, not through her, not past her, directly into her eyes, like he had just discovered she existed. "Where did you hear that?" His voice was low, dangerous, but this time the danger wasn't aimed at her. Marcus Cole, 2 of his guys. Sarah said each name without breaking eye contact, right outside the hotel, 547. They spoke in Italian because they thought nobody would understand. She swallowed. My mother was Italian, and I understood every word. The guard was less than a meter away now, his hand reaching out, ready to seize her shoulder and drag her away, like the lobby guard had done just minutes earlier. But before his fingers could touch her, a small blur shot out from behind the stone planter, Lily. She had stayed by the wall like her mom told her. She had tried to stay still. She had tried to be brave. But she saw the big man moving toward her mom, saw his hand reaching out, and in the mind of a 5-year-old, the world is very simple. Someone is about to hurt my mom. She ran, on tiny legs in scuffed little shoes, the last rose still clutched in her fist. She planted herself in the narrow space between the guard and Sarah, standing there back to her mom. Face lifted up toward the guard, both arms stretched out wide, like the tiny wings of a little bird trying to protect its nest. "Don't touch my mom." Her voice was high, trembling, but loud, loud enough that Thomas turned his head. Loud enough that 2 people walking by slowed down and stared. Loud enough that Nathan Dalton, a man the entire city didn't dare raise its voice to, had to look down. And he saw her, a 5-year-old girl, tangled blonde hair, blue eyes swimming with tears, so small her outstretched arms looked like little twigs, standing between her mom and the world. She wasn't even as tall as the guard's knee. She was shaking so hard the rose in her hand was trembling. But she didn't run. She stood there, arms spread wide, looking up at a man 4 times her size with eyes that said, "If you want to touch my mom, you'll have to go through me first." Something cracked inside Nathan Dalton, not loudly, not dramatically, just a thin crack, along the concrete wall he had spent 36 years building around himself. Because when he looked at Lily, deep in a place he had buried long ago, he saw another 5-year-old child. That child had been thin too, afraid too, standing in a world way too big for him, but that child had no one standing in front of him with arms spread wide. No one running forward when someone got too close. No mother behind him. That child had been him. No one touches them. Nathan's voice sliced through the air like a blade. Not loud, but carrying a kind of authority nobody within 10 meters would dare question. The guard froze. His hand stopped reach, Nathan looked directly at him, and his stare was no longer cold. It had turned into something far more dangerous. "Thomas," Nathan said, sharp and fast, "step away from the car right now. Don't touch anything." Thomas didn't understand what was happening. But he had worked for Nathan Dalton long enough to know that when he used that voice, you didn't ask questions. "You moved." He let go of the door handle and stepped back 3 paces. Nathan pulled out his phone and dialed one number. "Code red, lock down the building. No one in, no one out. Get my real security team down to the lobby immediately. Not Marcus's team, mine, a 558. 2 minutes left. Everything happened fast. Nathan's private security chief appeared from the lobby doors less than 90 seconds after the call. 6 men in black suits behind him, not Marcus's team, Nathan's own private unit. Marcus Cole saw it all from across the street. Saw the team spill out, saw that Nathan was still standing on the sidewalk, not getting into the car. And that the flower-selling woman was right beside him. For just a second, Marcus's eyes locked with Nathan's through the traffic. And Marcus understood. He turned and ran, expensive shoes hitting the pavement, coat flying, hand reaching inside his jacket. He made it 6 steps. The 7th never touched the ground. 2 of the security team hit him from both sides. And Marcus Cole went down hard on the concrete. The thing he had been reaching for tumbled out of his jacket and clattered across the pavement. A gun, the backup plan. The other 2 guards were caught within 3 minutes. One of them tried to disappear into the crowd. Made it 3 meters. The third didn't even move. He just froze, like a rabbit in headlights. All 3 were on the ground, hands pinned behind their backs, faces pressed to the sidewalk. In less than 3 minutes, Nathan got back on the phone. "Call the police, bomb squad. There's an explosive device in my car, remote trigger." His voice didn't shake, didn't rise, completely calm. The calm of a man who had lived his whole life in a world where danger wasn't a stranger. But when he ended the call and looked at that sleek black car sitting less than 4 steps away, his jaw tightened. 4 steps, if not for that woman, 4 more steps and he would have been inside, and at exactly 6 o'clock when Marcus pressed the button. There would have been nothing left to say. Police sirens hit the air 10 minutes later, then more sirens. And more, until the whole stretch of street in front of the Harlow Grand was flashing red and blue. The bomb squad arrived in armored vehicles, full gear, 3 full blocks sealed off, the hotel evacuated. Hundreds of people flooding into the street, panicked, confused, asking what happened, and in the middle of all that, Sarah sat on the sidewalk with her back against the wall, Lily curled in her lap. Someone had wrapped an emergency blanket around their shoulders. Sarah didn't even remember who. She only knew her arms were locked around Lily, and her whole body was shaking. The kind of shaking that comes after all the adrenaline drains out, and your body finally realizes what just happened. Lily wasn't crying anymore. She lay quietly against her mom, eyes wide, the last rose still in her hand. Now all crushed. Then the bomb squad commander walked over. He looked at Nathan, then down at Sarah. Then back at Nathan. "Sir, we found the device under the rear passenger seat. Remote detonation, blast radius." He glanced at Lily, swallowed the rest of the sentence, and just said, "Enough to destroy the entire vehicle and anything within 3 meters. The device is being safely dismantled." Nathan said nothing. He stood there looking at the car, looking at the device being handled, silent. Then he looked down at the mother and daughter on the sidewalk. The flower seller he had walked past hundreds of times without seeing. The 5-year-old girl who had spread her arms wide to shield her mom in front of him. Nathan Dalton, a man who had never lowered himself for anyone, walked over and sat down on the sidewalk beside Sarah. Right there on the concrete, his expensive suit touching the ground, his knees level with her eyes. For the first time in his life, he was eye level with someone the world would call beneath him. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was softer than anyone who knew him would believe. "Sarah," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion. "Sarah Wells, and this is Lily." Lily shifted in her mom's arms and lifted her head, eyes still red. Lashes clumped with dried tears, the crushed rose still gripped in her tiny hand. She looked at Nathan, the man she had stood in front of just minutes ago, without even knowing who he was. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her voice small and scratchy. Nathan looked at her, 5 years old. She had just lived through something that would send grown adults into panic. She was still shaking, still holding a ruined rose, and the very first thing she said wasn't that she was scared, or that she wanted to go home. She asked if he was okay. 36 years. 36 years Nathan had been alive, with hundreds of employees, partners, men who called themselves loyal. Not a single one of them had ever asked him that question and truly meant it until a 5-year-old girl with red-rimmed eyes sat on a sidewalk and did. "I'm okay," Nathan said, and there was something in his voice he didn't recognize at first, something softer. More honest. "I'm okay because of your mother." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the most expensive room she had ever stepped foot in. Nathan Dalton's penthouse on the 20th floor, glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling, the whole city spread out below. Lights coming alive one by one in the dark, leather sofas, polished oak table, not a single scratch or speck of dust. Everything so perfect it almost felt lifeless. And on a sofa that cost more than 3 months of Sarah's rent, Lily was asleep, curled up like a little kitten, head on a velvet cushion, the crushed rose still gripped in her hand. Even in sleep, exhausted, her small body had been through too much for one afternoon that should have just been about flattening rose petals on the sidewalk. Nathan sat across from Sarah, the oak table between them. His security chief stood quietly by the door. A few minutes earlier, Nathan had heard the full report. Marcus Cole had confessed the moment police started questioning him. A rival crime boss named Perry Grant, who controlled the east side of the city, had paid $700,000 for Nathan's assassination. The plan had been in the works for 3 months. Marcus had recruited 2 other guys who both spoke Italian. They had used that language as their working language on purpose, because they were completely certain nobody in Nathan's circle would understand it. 3 months, the man Nathan had trusted most had been selling him out to an enemy for 3 whole months. And Nathan hadn't known, but that wasn't what filled his mind right now. He looked at the woman sitting across from him, her hair half undone, eyes a little swollen, hands still trembling, though she was trying to hide it by lacing her fingers together in her lap. The faded shirt, the worn shoes. For 4 months he had walked past her every single day and had not once seen her. "You overheard a plan to kill me," Nathan said slowly, weighing each word. "You understood what they were saying, and instead of taking your daughter home to safety, you stayed. You tried to warn my driver. You tried to come inside the lobby. You got pushed out, and you still stood there, waiting for me to walk out, with a 5-year-old child in your arms." He paused. "Why?" Sarah looked down at her hands, silence for a few seconds. Then she lifted her eyes and met his. And what he saw, there wasn't calculation, wasn't expectation, wasn't any of the familiar things he was used to reading in other people's faces. Just exhaustion and truth. "My mother taught me that when you see something wrong and stay silent, you become part of that wrong." Her voice was soft, but it didn't shake. and I don't want my daughter to grow up watching her mom turn away when she knows someone's about to be hurt. I want Lily to know that her mom is the kind of person who tries her best. Even if no one listens, even if she gets thrown out, even if she's shaking the whole time. She glanced at Lily sleeping on the sofa. She saw me get pushed out of the lobby. She cried, and I almost gave up. Her voice went lower. But if I gave up, what would I be teaching her? Nathan didn't answer right away. He just watched her. And his silence wasn't the cold kind he usually used to control a room. It was the silence of a man hearing something he hadn't prepared himself to hear. "What's your situation right now?" he asked after a long moment. Sarah hesitated. She wasn't the type to complain. Not the type to ask for sympathy, but he had asked, and after everything that had just happened, she was too tired to pretend everything was fine. So she told him, briefly, no drama, just the facts. Third-year medical student, met a man named Ryan, wealthy, charming. Then the violence started. Divorced while pregnant. Her mother, Gloria, died of cancer the same month Lily was born. Alone, no money, no family, selling flowers to survive, and Ryan's family was now suing for custody of Lily. The court hearing was next week. If she lost, she would lose her daughter. When she finished, she fell quiet. Eyes down, she had asked for nothing. She had only told the truth because he had asked. Nathan listened without showing anything on his face. Anyone watching would have thought he was completely unmoved, but his security chief, who had stood at his side for 10 years, saw Nathan's fingers tighten slightly on the armrest, saw his jaw go hard when she mentioned the abuse, saw his eyes shift to Lily when she talked about the hearing. Later, a car took Sarah and Lily home. Sarah carried Lily, still deep asleep, thanked him in a hoarse voice, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and Nathan stood alone by the penthouse window, looking down at the city he had believed he conquered. The city he moved through like a king, seeing through people, treating everything like a tool. How many times had he walked past her? How many times had he looked through her like she wasn't even there? She had been there every single day for 4 months, with her basket of roses and her little girl, and he had never once seen her. And today, the woman he had treated as invisible had risked everything with her 5-year-old daughter beside her to save his life, not because she knew him. Not because she expected anything, but because her mother had taught her that silence is complicity. Find out everything about Sarah Wells, Nathan told his security chief. Her situation, the lawsuit, the hearing, everything. Report to me in the morning. His security chief paused at the door, then said in a voice softer than usual, "Sir, she's about to lose her child, and today she still stopped to save you." Nathan didn't turn around. He just kept looking out at the window. The silence stretched so long his chief thought there might not be an answer. Then Nathan spoke, low, quiet, "Arrange for me to see her again." Nathan chose a small cafe 4 blocks from the Harlow Grand. Not a fancy restaurant, not his penthouse office, not any place where his power soaked into the walls. Just a regular cafe. Wooden chairs, warm light, the smell of espresso in the air, the kind of place where a single mom could sit without feeling out of place. He had thought about that. For the first time in his life, Nathan Dalton had considered how the person across from him might feel sitting at his table. Sarah arrived on time, no makeup, hair tied neater than the day before, the cleanest shirt she owned, still faded but carefully pressed. Lily wasn't with her. She had left her with a neighbor. Sarah sat down across from him, back straight. Hands on the table, the eyes of someone waiting for bad news, because in Sarah's experience, When a powerful man asks to meet in private, it is rarely to give you a gift. Nathan didn't circle around it. I know about the hearing next week, he said. I know Ryan's family is suing for custody of Lily. I know you don't have a lawyer because you can't afford one. And I know that if you lose your daughter. Sarah's eyes changed instantly, not fear, anger. A cold, quiet kind of anger, the kind learned during years with someone who used your feelings against you. You investigated me, not a question. Yes, Nathan said. He didn't deny it. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. And I didn't save you so you could dig through my life. Her voice stayed calm, but her knuckles had gone white under the table, not just anger, humiliation. Everything she had tried to carry quietly, laid out in a report delivered to him that morning. I didn't save you to be repaid, Sarah said. I did it because it was right, and I don't need you turning me into a charity project. That's not what I intend. Then what do you intend? A lawyer, an apartment, a better school for Lily? Yes. All of that, Nathan answered plainly. The best lawyer in the city for your hearing. A safe apartment in a good area. Tuition for Lily at any school you choose. Sarah pressed her lips together. Nathan saw her swallow, saw her blink more than usual, saw the battle happening behind her eyes, because one part of her, the mom who might lose her child next week, wanted to say yes right away. And another part, the woman who had once been controlled by a man's money and power, was warning her, don't make that mistake again. Why? She asked, her voice softer now, and for the first time he heard the real exhaustion in it. Not from today, from years, because you saved my life, Nathan said, and I know you didn't do it to be repaid. That's exactly why I want to help. Because you didn't ask for anything, because you expected nothing, because you're the kind of person who risks everything to save a stranger, and then goes home to cook pasta for her child like nothing happened. He paused. You don't need me to make you a charity case, but you do need to not lose Lily, and I can help with that. Silence settled between them. Sarah looked down at the cup of coffee in front of her, gone cold. She traced the little ring of moisture along the rim with one finger, slowly, like she was weighing every last bit of pride she still had, against every bit of fear that next week she might walk out of a courtroom without her daughter. Finally, she looked up, just the lawyer, she said, firm, even though her eyes had gone wet. I just need to not lose Lily. I don't need the apartment. I don't need the school, just the lawyer. Nathan nodded, but after Sarah stood, thanked him, and walked out of the cafe, Nathan stayed seated. He looked at the chair she had just been sitting in, at the coffee she had barely touched, and he knew he would do more than hire a lawyer, not because he owed her, not because of calculation, but because for the first time in 36 years, Dalton wanted to do something right for someone, just because it was right, and that feeling, that new, unfamiliar feeling of wanting to do good without expecting anything back, was so strange to him he didn't even know what to call it yet. 15 blocks east of the Harlow Grand, in an office on the 12th floor of a building with no name on its front, Perry Grant sat behind his desk, 48 years old, silver hair slicked straight back, narrow face, sharp jawline, pale gray eyes that never blinked when receiving bad news, the kind of man whose anger doesn't flare up like fire, it freezes into ice, and right now he was very angry. His guy finished the report and stood there waiting for a reaction. Perry said nothing for 30 seconds. 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes in that silent room. $700,000, 3 months of planning, a plan he had called perfect, turned to ash because of one variable nobody had accounted for. Who broke it? Perry asked a woman. She sells flowers outside the Harlow Grand. She overheard the guys speaking Italian and warned Dalton. Perry's brow tightened, just barely. A flower seller, yes. 27 years old. single mom, 15-year-old daughter. Her mother was Italian. So she speaks the language. Silence. Then Perry smiled. Not a nice smile, a cold one, just one corner of his mouth. The smile of a man who just found something interesting in the wreckage. A flower selling mother and a 5-year-old girl, he repeated slowly. Dalton spends millions on security, surrounds himself with guards and cameras and technology, and a sidewalk flower seller saves his life. He leaned back in his chair. Find out everything about her. Everything, and find out what Dalton is doing for her. 2 days later, the report landed on Perry's desk. Sarah Wells, the top attorney in the city, had agreed to represent her in the custody case. Fees covered by Nathan Dalton. Dalton had met with her twice since the bombing. Perry set the papers down, and the cold smile came back. Dalton's new weakness, he said to the empty room, in 10 years of going up against Nathan, Perry had never found one. Nathan had no family, no girlfriend, no real friends. Nothing Perry could reach to make him hurt, until now. Don't target Dalton. Perry told his guy, not yet. Target the flower seller and the child. At the same time, 15 blocks west, Nathan Dalton sat in a conference room on the 18th floor of the Harlow Grand, and he was tearing everything apart. Across the table sat 2 businessmen from Boston, there to close a joint hotel development deal along the East Coast, a deal that was supposed to benefit everyone, and Nathan was destroying it. Clause 4, unacceptable. Clause 7, profit split is 64-36, not 50-50. Clause 11, I keep brand control. Non-negotiable. The older businessman tried to reason with him. Mr. Dalton, we already discussed and agreed on these terms. I changed my mind. 3 words, flat. The younger man opened his mouth to push back. Nathan looked him dead in the eyes with a stare his security chief knew well. A look that had made dozens of partners back down. A look that said, this conversation ends when I say it ends. The 2 men left 10 minutes later, pale, the deal in pieces. His security chief closed the door and looked at Nathan. You just blew up that relationship, he said, calm but blunt in the way only he dared to be with Nathan. It wasn't necessary. That deal was good for us, you know that. Nathan said nothing. You're doing exactly what you always do. His chief continued, pushing people away, turning every negotiation into a battle. You almost died because the man you trusted most betrayed you, and now you're responding by trusting less. Controlling more, being harder. Nathan stayed silent. His chief added one last thing. If you keep this up, next time there won't be anyone standing outside to warn you, because there won't be anyone left who wants to save you. Then he placed something on the table, a folded piece of paper. My guy drove Lily to school this morning at Miss Wells's request. She asked them to give you this. Nathan looked at the paper, opened it. A crayon drawing, 3 figures standing side by side. Smallest one with yellow hair, clearly Lily. The middle one with long hair holding flowers, Sarah. And the tallest figure, nearly twice the height of the others, wearing a gray suit, labeled in wobbly little kid handwriting, tall Mr. Nathan stared at the drawing for a long time. His chief had left. The conference room was empty, and Nathan looked at those 3 crayon figures, at those crooked letters spelling tall Mr., and he thought about the man he had just been 10 minutes earlier, looking into someone's eyes and crushing them just because he could, cold without needing to be, cruel without needing to be, controlling without needing to be, exactly the kind of man who had made Marcus hate him enough to take $700,000 to have him killed, exactly the kind of man Sarah Wells should never have saved. He folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The crack in his concrete wall widened just a little more. Courtroom number 7. County Courthouse, Monday morning, 9 a.m. Sarah sat on the left side of the room, back straight, hands on her knees, nails trimmed short and clean, the only white blouse she owned, carefully pressed. The night before, beside her sat the attorney Nathan had hired, Margaret Thornton, 62 years old, short silver hair, ruler, straight posture. the calm eyes of someone who had stood in courtrooms more than 30 years and never once blinked at an opponent. This woman charged by the hour what amounted to a month of Sarah's rent, and Sarah knew it and tried not to think about it. Across the aisle sat Ryan and his family's entire legal team, 3 attorneys, all in expensive gray suits, all with laptops open, all radiating the relaxed confidence of people who know they have enough money to drag this out until the other side simply breaks, and Ryan, 31, handsome in the way Sarah had once loved and now found nauseating, sat there with a faint smile when he glanced in her direction. She knew that smile. It said, "I will win, you will lose." Sarah swallowed the tightness in her throat and looked straight ahead. Lily wasn't there. Sarah had left her home with a neighbor. She refused to let her little girl watch her parents face each other in a courtroom. The child had already seen enough. The judge entered. Things got started. Margaret rose first, and from that first moment, Sarah understood why Nathan had chosen her. Margaret didn't dramatize. She laid every piece of evidence in front of the judge with the precision of a surgeon. Medical records, a fractured rib, bruising on the upper arm, a cigarette-burned scar on the left shoulder, police reports, 2 calls made by Sarah, 2 times Ryan was released on bail within 3 hours, a restraining order, 1 violation reduced to a warning because his family's lawyers argued for leniency. Then Margaret shifted to the second part, Sarah as a mother, preschool evaluations noting Lily's exceptional development, teacher comments describing her as social, confident, always talking about her mom with shining eyes, pediatric records showing healthy weight, healthy height, all vaccinations up to date. Under extreme hardship, Sarah Wells had raised her daughter alone, and she had raised her well. Margaret sat down. Across the aisle, Ryan still wore that same small smile. Then the Calloway family's lead attorney stood, a man in his 50s, deep voice, the kind of lawyer paid to make black look white without anyone noticing where the road forked. He acknowledged the abuse, acknowledged the restraining order, acknowledged every single fact Margaret had presented, in a tone of sad sympathy that made it all sound not quite relevant. Then he pivoted to what he called the real concern. "The child's current environment, Your Honor," he said, calm but deliberate. "We do not deny that Miss Wells loves her daughter, but love is not enough if the child's surroundings are unsafe." He opened a folder. "Miss Wells currently resides in an apartment provided by Nathan Dalton, owner of the Harlow Grand." Sarah's stomach clenched. Nathan Dalton, the attorney continued, had a documented history of ties to organized criminal activity. Law enforcement had opened multiple investigations over the past decade. The FBI had subpoenaed him as a witness in a federal money laundering case just last year. The courtroom went silent, not regular silence, the kind where the air feels thin. Miss Wells has placed her daughter within the orbit of a man under federal scrutiny, the attorney said. A man whose own security team was arrested 2 weeks ago for conspiring to set off a bomb, Your Honor, and the 5-year-old child was present at the scene. The judge frowned as she reviewed the documents. Then she looked at Sarah. Sarah felt that look like a hammer. The judge was seeing her differently now, not as a brave survivor of abuse, but as a mom who had pulled her daughter into the orbit of a crime world. Sarah turned her head, and her eyes met Nathan's. He was sitting in the back row. He had come to make sure things went smoothly. And now his very presence in this room was unraveling everything. Sarah looked at him, and for the first time saw with total clarity what she couldn't deny. He was not just a businessman, he was exactly what that lawyer had just described, and she had brought her daughter into his world. Everything felt like it was tipping over the edge. Then Margaret Thornton rose to her feet. "Your Honor, before we proceed to my closing remarks, I have a witness who can speak directly to the character and courage of Miss Wells. I call Mr. Nathan Dalton to the stand." A ripple of murmurs moved through the room as Nathan stood from the back row and walked forward. Margaret looked at Nathan, then at Sarah, her eyes asking, "Did you know about this?" Sarah gave the smallest shake of her head. She hadn't known. The judge studied Nathan from head to toe, taking in the suit, the quiet authority, the way the room seemed to shift when he moved. She knew who he was. His name had been spoken alongside the words organized crime less than 5 minutes earlier. "You are Nathan Dalton." "Yes, Your Honor." "And what is your relationship to Miss Wells?" "Miss Wells saved my life 2 weeks ago. I am helping her out of gratitude." "There is no other relationship." The judge was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You may speak briefly." Nathan stepped forward. He didn't look at the judge first. He looked directly at the Calloway attorney, the man who had just used his name as a weapon against Sarah. "Everything counsel has said about me, I do not deny," Nathan began. His voice was calm, measured. "I am the man he described. My record is real. The investigations are real. I'm not here to defend myself." He paused. "I'm here to speak about Sarah Wells." The courtroom went completely still. 2 weeks ago, 3 of my own security guards conspired to kill me with a bomb placed in my car. They spoke in Italian because they believed no one would understand. He glanced toward Sarah. She was staring at him. Eyes wide, hands clenched in her lap, Sarah Wells, who sells flowers outside my hotel, understood every word. Because her mother was Italian, she could have taken her 5-year-old daughter home and pretended she heard nothing. No one would have known. No one would have blamed her. She was a stranger to me, a woman I had walked past every single day without seeing. His voice lowered slightly. Instead, she warned my driver and was ignored. She entered my lobby and was pushed out. Her daughter cried because she saw her mother shoved aside, and Miss Wells still did not leave. She waited outside, grabbed my sleeve, and repeated in precise Italian exactly what she had overheard, so that I would believe her. He turned to face the judge. This woman risked her life to save a man she did not know. Not for money, not for influence, not for any reward, but because her mother taught her that silence in the face of wrongdoing is being part of that wrongdoing. He let that settle. That is a moral compass that money cannot purchase, and that is the kind of mother Lily Wells has. He met the judge's eyes. I provided housing and legal counsel because she saved my life and could not afford one. There is nothing beyond that. If my help puts her at a disadvantage in this court, I will withdraw it immediately, because the only thing that matters is that that child is not taken from the best mother she could ever have. Nathan stepped back. The room stayed silent. Then Ryan Calloway shot to his feet. Not calmly, he shot to his feet. His chair scraped across the floor. His face was flushed, his hands clenched, that smug little smile. Gone, replaced by something Sarah recognized immediately because she had seen it too many times behind closed doors. Uncontrolled rage. "This is ridiculous," Ryan snapped. "She drags my daughter to sell flowers on the street and lives off a crime boss, and this court just sits here listening to a criminal tell a sob story." His own attorney grabbed his arm to pull him back down. Ryan jerked away. "Lily is my daughter," he shouted, eyes locked on Sarah. "She's always been like this, always playing the victim, always manipulating, Mr. Calloway." The judge's voice hit like a gavel. "Sit down." Ryan didn't sit. "She's always been, Mr. Calloway." The judge's voice struck again. "Sit down immediately, or I will note this behavior in the record." Ryan stood there, breathing hard, face red, fists tight, and the entire courtroom saw exactly who he was. No medical files needed, no police reports, no restraining order. 30 seconds of visible fury in front of the judge. And months of carefully built strategy unraveled. The judge watched Ryan finally sit down, watched his attorney try to pull things back together, then looked at Sarah, who sat upright, silent, eyes wet but unshed. The judge had seen enough. 45 minutes later, the ruling came. Sarah Wells was granted full custody of Lily. Sarah barely remembered walking out of the courtroom into the hallway. She only knew she was standing against a corridor wall, and she was crying, not quiet tears, deep, shaking sobs. The kind she had held back for 4 months of selling roses, for 2 whole years of surviving alone since the day Gloria died. She cried from relief, from the release of fear, because someone had finally stood up and said she was a good mother. And the one who decided had listened. Then the waiting room door opened. The neighbor stepped out with Lily. The moment Lily saw her mom, she let go and ran on tiny legs across the courthouse floor, blonde hair flying. Straight into Sarah's arms. "Mommy, are you crying?" "I'm crying because I'm happy, sweetheart." Lily wrapped her arms around her mom's neck, pressed her little face into Sarah's shoulder, and whispered, "Can we go home now?" 3 days after the hearing, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. 4 words going around and around in her mind: organized crime, activity. She had tried to push them aside, told herself they were just tactics from Ryan's lawyer, that anything can be said in a courtroom, but she remembered the way the judge's brow had tightened at that phrase, the way the air in the room had shifted, the way even Margaret Thornton, 62 years old and unshakable, had gripped her pen just a little harder. Those reactions weren't theater, they were recognition. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Sarah sat at the small kitchen table, opened her old laptop, and searched Nathan Dalton. The results flooded in, not glowing stories of a self-made success. Investigative pieces, public records, names and numbers she had to read twice before they felt real. The Harlow Grand wasn't just a hotel chain. It was described as the clean front of an underground empire. Real estate, gambling, private lending, and things that journalists just called illicit operations. The FBI had subpoenaed Nathan twice. The police had opened 4 separate investigations over the last decade. None had led to charges, but more than enough to make it clear to anyone in law enforcement exactly who Nathan Dalton was. There were articles about competitors who went bankrupt after refusing to sell property to him. Anonymous sources describing his methods as ruthless, precise without exception. One photograph showed him walking out of a federal courthouse after his second subpoena. Face calm, eyes steady, not a trace of fear. Sarah stared at that photograph for a long time. That was the face she had seen every day outside the hotel. The man who had sat down beside her on the sidewalk while the bomb squad worked, who had hired a lawyer to stop her from losing Lily, who had looked at her in a cafe and said that was exactly why he wanted to help, in a tone she had believed was completely sincere. And that was also the man the FBI investigated for money laundering. She closed the laptop, walked into Lily's room. Her daughter was asleep, blonde hair spilled across the pillow, the dried rose from that terrible afternoon resting on the nightstand. Mouth slightly open, breathing soft, one small hand loosely curled on the blanket. Sarah stood there and felt the question hit her again and again like waves. She had pulled her daughter out of Ryan's world, a world where violence hid behind closed doors. And what world was she stepping into now? Nathan's world, where bombs got planted under car seats, where security guards sold their bosses to enemies, where rival crime bosses plotted from offices with no names on the doors. Lily was 5. She had already watched her mom get shoved out of a lobby, had already sat wrapped in an emergency blanket while a bomb squad dismantled something under a car. She had seen enough for a lifetime. Sarah would not let her see more. She went back to the living room, picked up her phone and called Nathan. He answered after 2 rings. Sarah. His voice was steady, but there was something softer in the way he said her name now than the first time. Like it had become familiar in his mouth. I know who you are, Sarah said. Her voice trembled, but each word was clear. I've read everything. I know what you do. I know what the Harlow Grand is. I know what the FBI has said about you. Silence on the line. I'm grateful to you, she continued, and her voice caught there, because that part was true, painfully true. You stood up for me in court. You helped me keep Lily. I will never forget that. She took a breath. But I can't let my daughter grow up in that world. I pulled her away from one dangerous man. I won't place her in the orbit of another, even if he's been kind to me. Even if he saved my life, she swallowed. Please don't contact me again. Silence, long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Then Nathan's voice came back, low, quiet, carrying something she had never heard from him before, not anger. Not coldness, something close to sadness. I understand. 2 words, then the line went dead. Sarah lowered the phone, stared at the dark screen, and cried. She had chosen her daughter over the man who had saved her life. Nathan set the phone down on his desk very slowly, like putting it down any faster might crack something inside him loud enough to hear. The penthouse was silent. The city beyond the glass was still lit, still moving, still alive, but this room felt empty. On his desk, between reports and security files, Lily's crayon drawing lay open, 3 figures, a mom with flowers, a little blonde girl, and tall mister in a gray suit. Nathan stared at the drawing, and for the first time understood why it hurt. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was the only thing in this room made by someone who genuinely wanted him close. And that child had just been carried out of his life by her mother. Sarah was right. He knew she was right. That was the worst part. If she had been wrong, he could have called back, argued, persuaded, fought for it. But she wasn't wrong. She had said he was dangerous. He was. She had said his world wasn't safe for a child. It wasn't. 2 weeks ago, there had been a bomb under his car seat, and a 5-year-old girl had been sitting on a sidewalk less than 10 meters away, wrapped in a foil emergency blanket. If Sarah hadn't overheard that conversation, if she hadn't been brave enough to do what she did, that little girl might have been near him when it went off. He had lost them, not because of Perry Grant, not because of Marcus Cole, not because of enemies, because of himself, because for 10 years he had built an empire through fear and control, because he had shaped himself into the kind of man a good mother must stay away from to protect her child, because he was exactly what he had always been proud to be, dangerous, and now that danger had driven away the only 2 people who had ever made him feel even a little bit human. His security chief knocked at some point, stepped inside, saw Nathan standing by the window, the phone on the desk, Lily's drawing still open. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He could read it in the way Nathan stood, in the slight drop of his shoulders, in the way his hands hung at his sides instead of clenched. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Nathan didn't turn around. Silence stretched between them. Then Nathan spoke, his voice lower than his chief had ever heard it. No, 1 word, no wall, no defense, no explanation, just the bare truth, but that's my fault. His chief stayed still, didn't offer advice. This wasn't a moment for strategy. This was Nathan Dalton, standing in front of the consequences of who he was. without anyone else to blame, without a problem he could solve with money or force, just the truth. He was a threat to the people he cared about, and she had been right to walk away. That same night, 7 blocks west, in the apartment Nathan had provided and that Sarah knew she would soon have to leave, she sat beside Lily's bed. Her daughter had been asleep for hours, breathing softly, one arm wrapped around the dried rose, a new drawing taped to the wall above her. 3 figures again, Mom, little girl, tall Mr. Sarah brushed her daughter's hair back slowly, over and over, like a quiet ritual, and she cried, not loudly, just tears sliding down her face in silence, the kind of crying she had learned during her years with Ryan. The kind that wouldn't wake the person beside her. She had done the right thing. She knew she had done the right thing. But right doesn't mean painless, and that night, on opposite sides of the city, 2 people lay awake staring into the space the other had left behind, understanding that some losses don't come from enemies in the dark, but from the truths we carry within ourselves. 1 week after her last call with Nathan, Sarah led Lily up the narrow staircase of their new apartment building. 3rd floor, she had left the place Nathan provided, found something smaller, cheaper, paid for with flower money. Not spacious, not pretty, but hers. Nobody could use it against her in a courtroom. Lily climbed the last step, breathing hard, then laughed. Mommy, our new home is so high up. Sarah smiled, unlocked the door, stepped forward, and looked down, sitting perfectly in the center of the dorm. It was a rose, black, not deep red mistaken for black. Truly black, the kind nature doesn't make on its own. Beside it, a folded white piece of paper. Sarah's hand was trembling before she could even command it to stop. She unfolded it, clean, printed letters. You should stick to selling flowers and stop interfering in things that aren't yours. No signature. None needed. Sarah stood there with that paper in her hand and felt the world narrow to a single point. Someone knew where she lived. Someone knew she had moved. Someone had stood outside this door where her daughter slept every night and left a threat as casually as leaving an invitation. Mommy, the flower is so pretty. Lily reached for the black rose. Sarah grabbed it first, tossed it straight in the trash, picked Lily up, stepped inside, locked the door, the bolt, the chain, the curtains. Then she slid down to sit on the floor with her back against the locked door. Lily in her lap, trying to slow her breathing as it went shallow and fast. Lily looked up with wide eyes. Mommy, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. Mommy's just a little tired. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She lay beside Lily, eyes open, listening to every single sound. Footsteps in the hallway made her hold her breath. A door slamming downstairs sent her heart racing. A passing car outside made her sit up and peek through the curtain slit. Someone knew where she lived, and she was completely alone. The next day, she still went to the corner to sell roses. Not because she wanted to, but because if she didn't sell flowers today, there would be no groceries tonight. Life didn't give her the luxury of being scared for long, but from the moment she set the basket down, her eyes never stopped moving. Left, right, every parked car, every person walking past, and then she saw it. A black car with tinted windows, parked about 50 meters away across the street, engine running, nobody getting out, just waiting. She told herself it might be a coincidence, someone just idling for a pickup, but when she moved her basket to another corner, the car rolled forward slowly, keeping the same distance. Mommy, why do you keep looking around? Lily glanced up from the pedals she was pressing. Blue eyes clear, completely untouched by fear, because she didn't know there was anything to be afraid of. And Sarah wanted to keep it that way. Just looking at the sky, sweetheart, it's a beautiful day. Inside, two voices were fighting. The first was pride, the voice she had used a week ago to tell Nathan not to contact her. That voice said she had drawn a line. She couldn't call him now, couldn't run back for protection from the very man she had walked away from. The second voice was instinct, a mother's instinct, which needed no logic, no pride, no rules. It knew only this: her daughter was sitting on a sidewalk pressing rose petals flat, while a black car watched from across the street. Call him, call now, protect your child at any cost. Sarah didn't call. She pushed the phone deeper into her pocket, like the physical distance could keep her resolve in one piece. She didn't call, but she was afraid enough that when Lily held up a rose and said, "Mommy, this one's the prettiest," Sarah's hand trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. Nathan's security chief walked into his office without knocking, for the first time in 10 years of working side by side. He didn't knock, and that alone made Nathan lift his head from the papers in front of him. "Perry has someone watching Miss Wells." 6 words. Even but his eyes were not. They said, "This is urgent." A black rose left at her door with a threat. A car tailing her and the child while they sell flowers. "My people confirmed 2 days ago the vehicle belongs to Perry. I had it followed in return, but I waited for verification before bringing it to you." And Nathan rose to his feet. Not slowly, not calmly, not the measured rise his chief had seen 1,000 times. He sprang up, his chair rolled back and hit the glass wall behind him. And in that instant, his chief saw something on Nathan's face he had never seen in 10 years. Fear. Not fear for himself. Nathan had never feared for himself, not even when a bomb sat underneath his car seat. This was fear for 2 people that he no longer had the right to protect because she had told him to stay away. My car, now. Nathan didn't go to Sarah's building first. He went to Perry, the nameless building, 15 blocks east. 12th floor, a place Nathan knew well but had never entered until tonight. He went alone. His chief objected. Nathan didn't listen. No bodyguards, no backup. No visible weapon, just Nathan Dalton walking through Perry Grant's office door at 9 p.m. Like he was stepping into his own living room, Perry sat behind his desk, unsurprised. He had known Nathan would come. That was the whole point. Threaten the weakest target, wait for the wolf to show up, study the reaction. Find the weakness. Ashton, Perry said with that familiar cold smile, heard about the flower seller. Nathan didn't sit. He stood in the center of the room, arms relaxed at his sides, and looked straight into Perry's eyes. "That woman and that child have nothing to do with what's between you and me. She ruined a $700,000 plan of mine. She has everything to do with it. She is a flower seller who overheard 3 fools you hired. The fault is with your men, not her." Perry tilted his head, still smiling. "Yet you're here because of her, which means she matters, which means I'm right." Silence settled between them. Nathan stepped forward once, just once, but the air in the room changed. Perry had faced Nathan for 10 years. He knew Nathan was dangerous, ruthless, calculated. He had never feared him because Perry calculated too. Perry was cold too, but tonight he looked into Nathan's eyes and saw something he had never seen before. Not the familiar coldness, not calculation, something more raw, more dangerous, desperation. The look of a man protecting the most important thing in his life. A man no longer weighing consequences, no longer playing a game, the look of an animal backed into a corner. Not because it's weak, but because someone has reached for what it shields behind its body. "Touch them," Nathan said. His voice so low it was almost a whisper. "And I stop calculating. I end everything, not part of it, everything. You, your men, your empire, everything you've built in 20 years. I will burn it to the ground. and I won't care what I lose in the process." Perry did not smile anymore, because Perry understood people. That was how he had survived 20 years in this world, and he could read that Nathan was not making a threat. He was stating a fact. The man standing before him was prepared to set fire to it all, even to himself. To protect a woman who sold flowers and a 5-year-old girl, that wasn't a weakness. It was the most dangerous thing Perry had ever faced. "Pull your people back," Nathan said, "tonight." Perry studied him for 5 long seconds, then gave one small nod. Nathan turned and walked out. He didn't look back. Outside, rain had started falling, October rain. Cold and heavy, the kind that pours straight down from a black sky without mercy. Nathan drove to Sarah's building. Parked across the street, he did not go up, he did not knock. He stood in the rain on the sidewalk opposite her building and looked up at the 3rd-floor window where a faint yellow light glowed through thin curtains. Then he took out his phone and called. Sarah answered after 4 rings. She didn't speak, just answered and waited. "Perry will not trouble you again," Nathan said. Rain streaming down his face, his hair plastered to his forehead, his suit soaked dark with water, but his voice was steady, gentle. "The car will be gone tonight. The black roses will never appear at your door again." Silence on the other end. He could hear her breathing, soft, unsteady. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you and Lily to be safe. That's all." Then he ended the call, slipped the phone into his pocket, and turned away, walking alone into the rain. On the 3rd floor, Sarah stood by the window, the phone still pressed to her ear. Even though the line had gone dead, she looked down and saw him, a tall, lean figure moving along the sidewalk in the pouring rain. No umbrella, no hurry, his shoulders a little lower than usual. His steps heavier than the confident stride she had once watched from her flower corner. He did not look back, did not glance up at the window. He simply walked on, alone in the rain, getting smaller and smaller until his figure disappeared at the end of the street. Sarah lowered the phone and began to cry, not because she feared the black roses, not because she feared Perry, not because she feared anything at all, but because she had just watched something she would not have believed possible 3 months ago. The man who had once looked through her like she didn't exist had walked into a room alone to face a crime lord for her, had stood in the rain outside her building to tell her she was safe, and had walked away without asking for a single thing in return. Not forgiveness, not another chance, not even a thank you. And through her tears, Sarah knew Nathan Dalton had changed, not because he claimed he had, but because the man he used to be would never have stood in the rain for anyone. 2 months passed. Nathan Dalton did not call Sarah, did not send a message, did not send flowers, did not appear at her door. He did nothing she had asked him not to do. He respected the boundary she had drawn, even though each day that boundary cut a little deeper. But Nathan did not stand still. He simply took all the energy he might have used to call her and poured it into something else. He began dismantling the man he used to be. His chief was the first to notice the change, not because Nathan made any big announcement, but because small decisions started shifting. First, Nathan shut down the 3 most illegal branches of his empire: the money lending operations, the underground gambling, and the division his chief had always called special services, in a tone that made the meaning obvious without saying it. Those 3 divisions brought in millions of dollars a year. Nathan closed all 3 within 6 weeks. He didn't sell them, didn't transfer them. He shut them down. His financial team thought he had lost his mind. His chief did not. His chief remembered the crayon drawing folded in his employer's jacket pocket and understood. In their place, Nathan poured money into legitimate real estate, hotels, restaurants, businesses that would show nothing but clean licenses and tax records if federal agents came knocking. He hired independent auditors to go through every corner of his finances. He sat down with lawyers to chart a full path toward legalization, It was slow, it was painful, it was expensive. He did it anyway. And quietly, without Sarah knowing, he did 2 more things. He hired a licensed private security firm with 0 ties to him to quietly watch over the neighborhood where Sarah lived, not to follow her, only to make sure no black car lingered there, no black rose appeared at her door, and through a charitable foundation where his name appeared nowhere, he anonymously funded a legal aid program for women who had survived abuse, not because Sarah needed it anymore, but because he thought of all the other women out there like her, who might not have someone brave enough to grab a sleeve and warn them in time. He did not do any of this hoping she would come back. He did it because she had shown him the man he wanted to be, and he owed it to himself to become that man, whether she stood beside him or not. 7 blocks west, Sarah was not standing still either. She was not waiting for anyone to rescue her. She never had been that kind of woman. 2 weeks after the night of rain, she walked into the neighborhood community center and signed up to volunteer. She started teaching Italian to local kids every Saturday afternoon for free. The class started with 6 kids in a small room that smelled faintly of mildew, an old whiteboard and markers running dry. Sarah stood in front of them and taught in Gloria's Italian, with the lullabies her mother once sang, with fairy tales told by the stove on winter evenings, and the kids loved her from day one. Lily sat in the very front row, proud that her mom now stood at a board instead of a sidewalk. At the same time, Sarah submitted scholarship applications to go back to medical school. 3 applications, 3 different schools. She wrote her essays after midnight, once Lily was asleep, at the tiny kitchen table. Under a soft yellow light, she told her story without asking for pity, just the truth. She sent each application with hands that were trembling, holding both hope and fear in equal measure. And during those late nights of writing, another idea started to take shape. A community center, nothing grand, just a place where moms like her could come and find free classes for their kids, legal guidance, a hot meal, and someone who would say, "I understand," and truly mean it. She started sketching plans on scrap paper, scribbling, crossing out, rewriting, adding a little more each night. One evening, close to 2 in the morning, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her hair piled loosely on her head, cold coffee beside her, papers scattered everywhere, when small footsteps sounded on the floor. Lily stood in the doorway, eyes half closed with sleep, clutching her dried rose, golden hair all tangled. "Mommy, what are you doing?" "I'm building a place," Sarah said softly, pulling her closer. "A place to help people like us, people who don't have anyone helping them." Lily climbed into her mom's lap, looked at the scattered pages with heavy, sleepy eyes. "Can I help?" Sarah wrapped her arms around her daughter, rested her chin on top of Lily's head, and smiled. "You already have, sweetheart. You're the reason I didn't give up." Lily nodded faintly, eyes drifting shut, and fell asleep in her mom's arms. Sarah sat there holding her, looking at the pages spread before her, and for the first time in a very long while, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt like she was living. 6 months after that night at the kitchen table, Sarah stood in front of a 2-story building on the corner of Maple and 7th Street, holding a pair of scissors, trying to keep her hands steady. She was not shaking from fear. She was shaking because she could barely believe this was real. Above the main door, painted in deep blue letters against a white background, Wells Community Center, her name, her mother's name, a name that a year ago nobody on this street had ever known, now sitting across the front of a building that held tutoring rooms, a free kitchen, language classes, and a small legal office for single moms. The idea had been Sarah's. The scribbled pages at 2 a.m., the phone calls with nonprofits, the afternoons spent knocking on doors asking for support. She had built the proposal herself, found the location herself, designed the programs herself. Nathan had funded it, not because she asked, but because when she presented the plan to him one evening on the balcony, her eyes had lit up in a way he had never seen when anyone talked about money or power, and he had said, "Let me help with this part," in a voice that made clear he was not giving a favor, but asking to be allowed to contribute. she had agreed, yet his name appeared nowhere on the building. Today, at the opening, about 60 people stood along the sidewalk, neighbors from the block, a few local reporters, moms from Sarah's volunteer group, kids from her Italian class, small, modest, no balloons, no fireworks, but real. Lily stood beside her mom, holding a fresh rose, the most beautiful one she had picked that morning, white dress, golden hair neatly braided, blue eyes fixed on the sign above, with the fierce, glowing pride only a child who loves her mother completely can show. At the back of the crowd, Nathan stood beside his security chief, not in the front row, not near the cameras, not beside Sarah on the steps. He chose to stand behind because this was not his day, it was hers. Sarah cut the ribbon. Applause broke out. Lily bounced beside her. Then Sarah stepped to the microphone, and the crowd went quiet. She glanced down at the speech in her hands, the one she had rewritten 7 times the night before, then folded it, slipped it into her pocket, and spoke in her own voice. 1 year ago, I sold flowers on the sidewalk and believed I was invisible. Her voice was gentle but steady. It did not shake. It did not break. It was the voice of a woman who had cried enough to know when to stop crying and begin speaking. I stood on that corner every day offering $3 roses to strangers who walked past, and no one stopped. No one saw me. She looked at Lily. The little girl was watching her mom, the rose pressed against her chest, her eyes shining. Today, I want to say something to anyone out there who feels invisible. Her voice strengthened. Just because people don't see you does not mean you don't matter. You matter. Your voice matters. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest truth. A brief stillness, then applause. Lily clapped the loudest. The rose caught between her tiny palms, her smile so wide, her eyes almost closed. At the back of the crowd, Nathan Dalton smiled, not the polished public smile he had worn for a decade at the Harlow Grand entrance, a real one, small, almost invisible unless you looked closely, but unmistakably real. 1 year later, Nathan Dalton sat in his penthouse office on the 20th floor of the Harlow Grand. Same room, same oak desk, same floor, ceiling windows. Yet everything had changed. Marcus Cole was serving 18 years in federal prison. His 2 guys were each serving 12. Perry Grant had lost nearly all of his power after his 3 largest operations got dismantled by federal agents, using evidence that Nathan had quietly passed through an intermediary, not for revenge, but to make sure black roses would never appear at anyone's door again. Harlow Empire had been rebuilt from its foundation, independent audits complete, all illegal divisions permanently closed, 8 legitimate real estate projects operating, and for the first time in a decade, when federal agents reviewed Nathan Dalton's records, they found nothing but clean licenses and tax receipts, slow, painful, expensive, done anyway, on Nathan's desk among the reports. In contracts rested 3 objects that had nothing to do with business. The first, the original crayon drawing, corners slightly worn from being unfolded too many times. 3 figures, mom holding flowers, little blonde girl, tall Mr. in gray. The second, a newer drawing, also in crayon, this time with a little cat and a building, beneath which Lily had written in careful letters, Mom. Center. The third, a photograph from opening day at the Wells Community Center, Sarah holding scissors to cut the ribbon, Lily beside her clutching a rose, and in the background, nearly hidden in crowd, the outline of Nathan. He looked at those 3 things every morning before beginning his work, not as a ritual, just as a habit, the kind of habit a person doesn't notice until someone points it out. His chief knocked at the door. This time he knocked. Sir, Lily's school called. Nathan looked up at once, posture sharp. What happened? Nothing bad, his chief said quickly. She's at the top of her class. The teacher wants to meet with the parents to discuss an advanced program for her. Nathan's shoulders relaxed. His chief caught the faint lift at the corner of his employer's mouth. Despite his best efforts to look composed, schedule it for me, sir. You don't have to attend a parent meeting. I want to. No further explanation. None needed. His chief nodded, made a note, and left. He had stopped being surprised a long time ago. Nathan returned to his desk when his phone vibrated. A message from Sarah with a photograph attached. He opened it. Lily, standing in her school uniform, golden hair braided into 2 neat plaits, smiling so hard her eyes were nearly closed, standing in front of a board that announced she was first in her class. Beneath the photo, Sarah had written, "The little flower seller from before," then a second line. "She's asking when tall Mister is taking her for ice cream again." Nathan looked at that photograph for a long time, at Lily's smile, a smile he might never have seen had Sarah chosen to pick up her daughter and go home that Tuesday afternoon. Instead of grabbing his sleeve, he looked at Sarah's words, written by the woman who had cut him out of her life to protect her child, and then let him back in when he proved himself worthy, not through promises, through actions, through months of standing in the rain without asking for anything, through an empire rebuilt from the ground up. Through the patience of a man who had finally learned that some things cannot be bought, cannot be controlled, cannot be demanded, they can only be earned. He typed a reply, "This afternoon. I'll bring a rose on the way." Then he set the phone down and looked out through the glass at the city he once believed he had conquered. A year ago he sat in this very chair looking down at the streets and seeing people as tools, seeing emotion as weakness, seeing trust as a luxury, seeing loneliness as strength, and a woman he had never truly noticed had stepped into the street with her small daughter, grabbed his sleeve, spoken Italian in her mother's voice, and saved his life, not because she knew him, not because she expected anything, but because her mother had taught her that silence in the face of wrong is being part of that wrong, and because she wanted her daughter to see that her mom was not the kind of woman who turns away. He had built an empire from iron and fear, yet the finest thing he had ever built was not the hollow grand, not the figures on any financial statement, not any empire. It was the decision to open his heart to 2 people he had almost walked past forever, a woman who sold flowers and a 5-year-old girl, 2 people the whole world had overlooked, yet the only 2 who had seen that he needed saving too. The strongest force in this world is not iron, it is the courage to be soft in front of the right people.